Yeah. So today's class is about the reaction of unsaturated carbon compounds with addenda. And let me just trace what we have done so far. We have looked at the catalytic processes where you have single bond formation, carbon-carbon bond formation. During the course of the initial lectures, we also looked at catalytic C double bond C formation, new CC formation. They were just rearrangement of existing C double bond C compounds to a different type of metathesis reactions I'm talking about. So we looked at catalytic CC bond formation, new CC bond formation, metathesis reaction, that is just rearrangement of C double bond C from one position to the other position. Then we looked at migrations to CO, migrations to CO, and then we looked at addition of hydrogen to double bonds, C double bond C compounds. And today we are looking at addition of HA, HM, HX, XY, XY. I may not touch upon, but some of these unsaturated compounds going to saturated compounds. Now, let's start off by, I think I have just an introductory slide which says that the same problem which we talked about when we are adding hydrogen can plague the addition of HA. But you do have some polarity difference between hydrogen and the group that is adding on. So it could be HB, it could be HN, HO, etc. And by the time we go to HF, it's highly polarized. HO is also highly polarized. So the only problem that you have is with CH, and that's a special problem because of the geometrical nature of CH. You have a severe steric repulsion that takes place when you want to add CH to a C double bond C. But let's start with hydroborylation. Hydroborylation, as you know, is a reaction that was pioneered by H.C. Brown, whose initials also had HC and B, and hydroborylation also involves HC and B. The interesting thing about hydroborylation was that it proceeded in such a manner that it led to anti-Markovnikov products, right? It led to anti-Markovnikov products. So the reason for such a reaction is quite obvious if you think of the fact that boron is more electropositive than hydrogen. So it's not surprising that that happens. But the end product could be different from a simple HOH addition or a HX addition. Added to this, there is the fact that because boron is oxophilic, if you have two groups which can be reduced, one is a CO and the other is a C double bond C, then because boron is oxophilic, you have reduction of the CO group. Okay, so the CO is getting oxidized and the C double bond C is left unreacted. So there is a chemoselectivity change when you go to hydroborylation. compared to a simple addition of an HX group. Let's talk about a rhodium catalyzed hydroborylation. In this case, surprisingly, you get back the addition to the unsaturated group C double bond C, and that can be traced to the fact that C double bond C interacts with rhodium better than C double bond O. And this feature enables unusual or a chemoselective hydroborylation of a group, which you might want to do, which might otherwise not be possible if you do not have the catalyst. So basically, you end up with a thermodynamically less stable product. Boron is oxophilic, so it would have preferred to go to the oxygen, but you've got a less stable product, but kinetically that is the preferred one because the C double bond C coordinates to rhodium better than the C double bond O. So let's take a look at what we have just discussed. Okay, before we do that, we'll take a look at the regioselectivity also. As I told you in the very beginning, boron is more electropositive than hydrogen, and so if you add two groups to a C double bond C, the product would lead to boron adding on to the carbon which has more number of hydrogens, and so that technically leads to the anti-Markovnikov type product. But the addition should not be called anti-Markovnikov actually. The product is an anti-Markovnikov product where you end up with, you usually end up oxidizing this with H2O2, and so you end up with the anti-Markovnikov product. Okay, you end up with the anti-Markovnikov product. That's what you end up with, and you added things in a anti-Markovnikov fashion. Ended up adding things in an anti-Markovnikov fashion. It's okay. So the addition of rhodium introduces a new complication. It brings back the Markovnikov type product when you do the rhodium catalyzed hydroborylation of this compound. So let's take a look at the mechanism of this reaction. The mechanism of this reaction follows pretty much what we know about oxidative ligand loss. So we have ligand dissociation, let's call it LD, ligand dissociation. PPH3 is removed from the reaction medium, and you have oxidative addition. That oxidative addition leads to a rhodium-3 product. So in principle, that can be a octahedral complex. And now because you have only 5 ligands around the rhodium, you have a vacant coordination site suitable for the addition of olefin to form an olefin complex. This is the step that leads to chemoselectivity. If you have a CO and a C double bond C, it is the C double bond C that is favored because of the rhodium. So rhodium is controlling, it's calling the shots, it's coordinating to the C double bond C, and so you end up with a migratory insertion migratory insertion is now taking place with the hydrogen migrating to the CH2 group, and that takes place in the same way as you expect for a Markovnikov type of addition, which leads to the product. Now there is a sensitive a balance between steric effects and electronic effects, so you almost always end up with depending on the type of steric bulk that you have, you could have different regioselectivity, but these reactions appear to go through this hydrogen adding on to the carbon, which is less substituted, so having more hydrogens. So that's the Markovnikov type addition, and that leads to this product where you have the boron attached to the more substituted carbon by reductive elimination.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, why won't the boron first migrate?
Very good question. A very good question. Your question is, let me put it like this. Is this what you are asking?
Yes, sir. First boron migrates to the olefin and then the hydrogen.
Yeah. So I thought about it. That's a distinct possibility. It seems to me that that's a distinct possibility. And then the reductive elimination will give you the same product. Only thing is, we now have to reverse the addition. The regioselectivity, if you want to explain the regioselectivity, you'll have to say that the boron migrates to the carbon, which is more highly substituted, right?
Yes, sir. But
Yeah.
Since boron is also very electropositive, like compared to hydrogen, it can also migrate, right?
No. If you look at the migratory migrating groups, they are one electron ligands in the neutral method, and they are anionic ligands in the ionic method of electron counting. So I preferred this addition, and I thought that in fact you can, I have not completed my explanation yet. In fact, I thought that boron now has a vacant orbital, right? Boron has a vacant orbital. So you could have CH2, CH3 migrating to this group, to the boron, which can also lead to the end product. Same product, where you would have rhodium attached to B CH2 CH3, right? And OR. Okay. Now, of course, the only difference is you would have to postulate a rhodium donating electron density to the boron, as opposed to in the transient complex that would be there. This group migrates, and then you have a dissociation. Are you all with me? I don't know if you're all with me. The question that Anantu asked was an interesting question, which was, why do we not hypothesize that a boron first coordinate, and then you have the same product? Okay, so if the boron migrates, you would have ended up with rhodium, CH2, in this case CH2, CH2, BOR2. That was not very clear. CH2, BOR, OR, and then a hydrogen, and then reductive elimination to product. So that's a equally good possibility. The only reason why I preferred this is because the boron is less likely to migrate as a one electron anionic type of ligand, not a one electron, an anionic type of ligand. And consistently we have found that it is the anionic type of ligands which migrate. Okay.
Sir, also, sir, in this case, yes, sir. Sir, also generally hydroboration we do with alkylated boron, not a hydroxylated boron. Like instead of OR2, we just use Br2H, right? Is this because of oxygen here that the selectivity is happening?
Most of the hydroborylations that people do, they do it with BOR2, where the OR group is a catecholate or a pinacolate.
Okay, sir. Just like 9-BBN, it's a good example of 9-BBN where there are alkyl groups instead of oxygen groups.
That is a possibility. Yes, that is a possibility. But if you see practically what people do, this is being done. Okay.
Yes, that's why I was asking whether the oxygen has any role to play with the migratory aptitude of hydrogen and so on. Because it donates electrons to.
Before we spend too much time on this, let me just tell you that I have not found proof for either one of these mechanisms. So yesterday when I was preparing this lecture, I struggled with the same question that you asked. Why do we say that hydrogen migrates and not the boron migrates? Okay, so and I agree with you that there is a distinct possibility that has not been ruled out in this case. So let's not spend too much time on this. And like I told you, instead of doing a simple reductive elimination, you can also think of a migration to a vacant group, because boron has a vacant coordination set, right? So these are things which are not, which almost come down to the level of semantics, because we are not distinguishing it with a kinetically discernible step or an intermediate that is being characterized. I hope you follow that point. Unless
Yes,
we
sir,
have, unless we have a way to distinguish what we are discussing, it's more or less semantics, and it becomes almost like a philosophical discussion rather than a practical point. Okay, so let's not spend too much time on this. I will go ahead with this. I'll tell you, the complications become even more when you start talking about silicon, which you're going to come to next. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So hydrosilylation. Now you're going to have umpteen questions with hydrosilylation, because it's even more complicated. I think I have a slide in which I discuss the electronegativity of these groups. I don't know whether I missed it. No, I'll come to it in a minute. So if you look at hydrosilylation, hydrosilylation is the addition of SiH, the hydrogen and the silicon groups across carbon-carbon double bond. And this again has been done with C double bond O, C double bond N, and there are a variety of catalysts which can do this. The catalyst which is simplest is H2PtCl6. That's not the active form of this catalyst, because silanes, I have written it for convenience as R3SiH. It could be RSiH3, R2SiH2, and R3SiH. Don't ask me why I have not put down SiH4. SiH4 is a nuisance. It's more difficult to handle. So people usually use these groups. Okay, and you get more control, slower reactivity with R3SiH. Selectivity becomes more when you have slower reactions. That's why you end up using sometimes bulky groups. Okay, H2PtCl6 is a catalyst of choice. This is called Spear's catalyst, I think. And in isopropanol medium, the Spear's catalyst is generated. It's a platinum 0 species. I think I have it in the next slide. I have it in the next slide, yes. So this is what I'm talking about. So Spear's catalyst, H2PTCl6 becomes a PT0 species. There is now some growing evidence that this in fact could be a platinum colloid, and maybe it is actually a heterogeneous catalyst. But there are a variety of catalysts which are completely homogeneous, and an example is the Karsted catalyst. Again, Karsted is the name of the person who invented it. It's a vinyl silane coordinated platinum 0. This is platinum 0. And an isolated species is this. This has been converted into a more reactive catalyst, which has got an N-heterocyclic carbene coordinated to the platinum 0. It's well known that even though platinum, this is also platinum 0, this is also platinum 0, but if you have more electron donating ligands on the platinum 0, now it becomes now the platinum 0 becomes platinum 0 becomes more easy to do an oxidative addition. If you remember the way in which we wrote the reaction steps, we normally write a oxidative addition. So the oxidative addition becomes more facile when you have electron donating ligand on the metal. So that's what we are talking about. So the standard mechanism which we wrote for hydroboration can be written for hydrosilylation. Then we call it the Chalk-Harrod mechanism. The Chalk-Harrod mechanism. Chalk-Harrod mechanism for hydrosilylation basically involves the same oxidative addition to platinum 0 to give you a platinum 2 species. And this platinum 2 species now loses a ligand. This is minus L, and then addition of the substrate plus substrate. So you have the right combination for doing a hydrogen migration, and reductive elimination from this product will get you back the catalytically active species. Okay, now in this case, it's well known that both migrations take place. There is some added complication, I will tell you. Everything seems to depend on the metal. In the case of rhodium and platinum, the mechanisms seem to be different. And some of the evidence for this comes from computational studies, which have been done earlier with PH3, but probably now repeated with other species. But the end product of the reduction reaction, of the addition reaction, is the same. Okay, so this is called the Chalk-Harrod mechanism. The first person who gave you the who gave this suggestion. Okay, so as I told you, we could have easily written the silicon migration. If you write the silicon migration, then the product is this. The product is this, where you have platinum 2 species in which the silicon has migrated to the olefin, and then you have an alkyl species which does a reductive elimination of these two entities, and you end up with the same product. Product is identical, and that's why I said much of this could be semantics, but because of the computational work that has been done, now there is enough evidence to show that rhodium and platinum go in different directions. The platinum goes where hydrogen migrates, the rhodium goes where the silicon migrates. So here is a slide on the electronegativity, which again emphasizes the fact that we are now dealing with dealing or walking on thin ice, because hydrogen electronegativity and silicon electronegativity are, or for that matter, even boron electronegativity are very close. So depending on the groups that are present on the boron, suppose I have oxygen, then this would become more electron deficient, right? In one way. In another way, because of the lone pairs on the oxygen, the pi orbitals can be filled. So that can also play a role. Silicon 1.8. So this is very clearly much lower in electronegativity compared to hydrogen. So these are complications. This is the reason why you have complications when you try to think about the migration. But originally, because of the atomic electronegativities, people thought that hydrogen would be the best group to migrate. And that's also because of the way in which proton or hydrogen mobility, I should say proton mobility is phenomenal. Hydrogen mobility is more than the mobility of many other groups, and that's a well-established fact in chemistry. Okay, so let's look at the mechanism of hydrogen Si additions. I would refer you to a paper which I have modified slightly. This is ACS Catalysis 2012. I'm going to take extensively from this paper, and I will point out some of the differences between that paper and what I'm going to present, and why I am suggesting what I am suggesting. So I'm not saying that I have a better, I have proof that what I'm saying is right, but the way in which they have presented it is slightly different, and it is more difficult to be consistent. So I think what I'm going to tell you is going to be more consistent. Let's take a look at it. You have to go through it. First of all, they are talking about, in this paper, they are talking about CO hydrosilylation, and that is also catalyzed by metal complexes. That is not only C double bond C hydrosilylation, but CO can also be hydrosilylated, and I'll show you how this increases the complication. First of all, you can have oxidative addition, and that is a common feature. Suppose I have a rhodium 1, which is usually the case. I can add the hydrosilylation reagent to give the HSiR3 group. Now I have the carbonyl coordination. This is the original proposal made by a person called Ojima for carbonyl coordination to olefin. Remember what I told you, if there is a competition, C double bond C wins. But if there is no competition, and if CO is the only group that has to be reduced, CO can be proposed as a species that can coordinate to the rhodium. So let's assume that the rhodium is coordinated to the CO, and I have a species which is looking like this. Now I have the option of migrating either a hydrogen or an SiR3. Here I have migrated, in fact, the SiR3 group, which leads to a species where the carbon is bound to the rhodium, and the SiR3 group is migrated to the oxygen. So although it is written like this, imagine rhodium like so, and SiR3 like this, R1, R2, And then you can think of silicon migration here and a carbon rhodium bond formation, which rhodium carbon bond formation, which leads to this species, right? So, and this is the other bond that we have formed. So this is what we have done. We have migrated the SiR3 group to the oxygen and formed this. So all the action happens on the rhodium. Even right through the circle, catalytic cycle, the action happens on the rhodium. The only difference is the Ojima mechanism suggests that SiR3 group is migrating to the oxygen of the ketone, resulting in the formation of the carbon rhodium bond. So this is one possibility. What later on, two people, Zheng and Chan, I think this is one group, Zheng and Chan, suggested a different mechanism for the hydrosilylation of ketones with di and trihydrosilane. This is because di and trihydrosilane, the rate was much better than the R3SiH group. R3SiH is very sluggish. Whereas if you have R2SiH2, then the reaction is much faster. So to explain that, Zheng and Chan suggested that a slightly different mechanism could be operating for the whole reaction. The first step in the reaction is an oxidative addition, which is very similar to the previous Ojima mechanism and the Chalk-Harrod mechanism that we used for olefin hydrosilylation also. So let's coordinate the carbonyl now to silicon. Instead of attaching the olefin to the rhodium, we can also think of the CO coordinating to the silicon. Now, I have a different setup altogether. The whole action seems to have shifted from the rhodium to the silicon. So the first step happens on the rhodium, all right, but the second step is happening on the silicon. Silicon is also having empty orbitals, and so a CO coordination to silicon. Silicon seems to be a possibility, and I can also think of, since the rhodium and silicon are connected, I can think of a weak interaction between the carbon and the rhodium and the oxygen and the silicon. But what they have proposed in the paper is the CO coordination to the silicon. Now, they have suggested two things. If I have more than one hydrogen on the silicon, that means R dash equals hydrogen. Remember, one hydrogen is essential for doing the oxidative addition. Oxide happens with one hydrogen, and that gives you that initial intermediate. But this intermediate, if it has one more hydrogen, then the reaction is much faster. So then they say that the hydrogen that is present on the silicon migrates to the carbon of the CO group. If R dash equals H, then migratory insertion of the hydrogen to the carbon happens. And that leads to an oxygen silicon bond, which is, of course, thermodynamically it would be highly favored. So I hope you follow the difference in the mechanism. The only thing that they have done is they have left that rhodium hydrogen untouched. Excuse me. So they have left the rhodium hydrogen untouched, and the only place where that hydrogen is going to come in is when you have the reductive elimination. So this species can have a reductive elimination step when I eliminate these two groups. I can eliminate them and get this product. Notice that this whole process could have happened with migratory insertion of, suppose it is not hydrogen, suppose R dash is not hydrogen, R dash, I should put it like that, R dash not equal to hydrogen, then you do not have the possibility, of this silicon hydrogen migrating to the CO. So then what can happen? Then what they suggest is the rhodium silicon, this bond, which I'm going to put in a different color now. This is, let's put it in light blue. This bond, this is the bond that is migrating to the carbon. Okay, so this bond migrates to the carbon, so which is right here. So you have to turn it around. Like I said, this could easily have been turned around. I could have written it in such a way that the carbon, let's write it like that, rhodium Ln H Si, oxygen coordinated to the silicon, and R1, R2 above the rhodium. So now I can migrate the rhodium onto the carbon, and if I did that, then I would end up with this intermediate. And that would lead to an oxygen silicon bond SiR2R species. So this is also a migratory insertion. Now all the action is really happening. All the action happens on the silicon. I should say all the action in the second half happens on the silicon, not on the rhodium. The first step is the rhodium activation. That's still true, but the second round, this reaction goes through a silicon-centered catalysis, and the silicon-centered catalysis leads to the same product, but it goes through different type of intermediates. Now, from what I read in the paper, the 2012 paper, quite a bit of this is from computational studies that they have done, and they have shown that the one pathway is much better than the other pathway. But you have a very clear reactivity difference between di and trihydrosilanes that is possible with the inner cycle. They call this the inner cycle. This is the inner cycle. Okay, and they call this the outer cycle. This is the outer cycle. The outer cycle is a violet cycle, and the inner cycle is a light blue cycle. Okay, but in both cases, the coordination is to the silicon. The CO is interacting with the silicon, and there is a like I said, because both silicon and rhodium are attached to each other in the oxidative addition through the oxidative addition step, one might as well write the C closer to the rhodium, and then it's very easy to see how this migration can happen in two different ways. Okay, I hope you follow now the complications that are there in the hydrosilylation reaction. Let me now tell you why they feel that this is even more plausible, and that is when you have a E known, there is very clear indication that the silicon is sitting next to the oxygen, and the selectivity is completely changed, and you can have the isolation of the siloxy form of the enol. Okay, that's just a silyl enol ether, right? This is the ether that's isolated in the reaction. So, in order to explain that, they say that this is a very straightforward way in which you can understand it. First, the silane oxidatively adds on to the rhodium. There is no doubt about it. This is oxidative addition of the carried out by the rhodium. And in most cases, if you remember what I told you about hydrogenation reaction, the moment rhodium undergoes oxidative addition, there is a distinct color change that happens in the rhodium chemistry. So you can recognize that the oxidative addition is something that is easy to do, and it has happened. And so the oxide is never contested. The second step is the one that is contested. Usually, where is the double bond coordinating? When you have a double bond and a CO present, then it's very easy to see how you can coordinate both the C double bond C and the CO. You can both are adjacent to each other, and the C double bond C and CO are also E knowns, so they're adjacent to each other. So you can form a nice complex like this. Now, I have the same possibility. If I have R dash equals hydrogen, then the hydrogen migrates from the silicon to the carbon, leading to a silicon oxygen bond. That would be the more favorable system. Silicon would form a oxygen bond to the oxygen rather than to the carbon. So you would end up with a species like this, where you have a silanol type of formation. That is now coordinated to a double bond. So you can have a reductive elimination in which you can end up with this product where you have allylic alcohol. That is one possibility. The other possibility is the formation of when R is not hydrogen, then you can end up doing the migration in such a way that you have rhodium attached to the carbonyl is in fact, they say it's a carbonyl insertion, and that's the one that I told you that it is actually a rhodium rhodium silicon bond is now breaking, and this is the bond that you're breaking. Rhodium silicon bond is what you're breaking in this step. Let me write that in green. So this is the bond that is broken, and you're adding it to the carbon. So this is the new bond that is formed. So this is the bond that is broken. So this is the green step. So this is a green step where the new bond that is formed is between rhodium and carbon, and the bond that is broken is between rhodium and silicon. So the rhodium silicon bond breaks, and you have a 1,4 addition, 1,4 addition to the enone, and that results again in a silicon oxygen bond. This the way in which it is written in the paper, it is attached to the R, but actually it is the silicon oxygen bond that is formed, and so you have a very nice enol ether, silyl enol ether that is generated in the outer circle. So outer circle is resulting in an enol ether. And when there is only one hydrogen that is present on the silane, you get the silyl enol ethers, which are very clear proof that the oxygen is interacting with the silicon. So this is again the reason why Zeng and Chan proposed this different mechanism, and it also explains why trihydrosilanes are more dihydrosilanes are more reactive. There is yet one more complication which I must point out, and this complication came up from Hoffman, from the fact that RSaH3 is even more reactive, most reactive. RSaH3 is even more reactive, and to account for this reactivity, and also the fact that you can trap silylenes, you can let me see if I can. I have not written it here, but you can trap these products. So that's why they were proposed. Okay, let's go on with it. First step is oxidative addition. No complication there whatsoever. But now the silane has got one more hydrogen on the silicon, and you can generate a silylene. Okay, you can generate a silylene, and what they found was that if I add a silanol R3SiOH to this group, then I end up trapping this silylene as a silyl ether. So people could isolate such ethers, and so they said that this must be a silylene which is present in the reaction medium. Plus, of course, computational studies were also carried out, but this is the reason why a silyl species is proposed, silylene species is proposed, coordinated to the rhodium. So again, the CO is coordinated to the silicon rather than the rhodium because of the oxophilicity of the silicon. So you now have hydrogen doing a 1,5 hydrogen migration. Okay, so you end up with like a 1,5 hydrogen migration, which results in the formation of a silicon oxygen single bond, and so this is in fact formation of a silyl ether again, and reductive elimination of this hydrogen and this group will give you the final product, which is the reduced ketone or aldehyde. So this is called Hofmann-Gade mechanism. This Hofmann is different from Roald Hoffmann. This is a person who is he works in a German university. I forget his first name, but this is not Roald Hoffmann. Okay, so now we have covered 3 different mechanisms for the hydrosilylation itself, and I think this is enough. I will skip this slide, and I will skip this slide also, and I will talk to you about hydrocyanation, because I think that is again slightly different from the industrially also important. Again, you can see that there's a metal, there's a difference in the way in which the metal turns the reaction from one direction to the other direction. If I have cobalt, I don't have a quick and ready answer for this cobalt carbonyl and nickel phosphite. The nickel phosphite is probably less electron rich compared to the cobalt, maybe, but the product that is obtained is different in these 2 cases between nickel and cobalt. And I will tell you some recent work in 2019 also, which suggests that cobalt and nickel can change the regioselectivity of the product. The catalytic cycle is very similar to what we have seen so long all along in this lecture and in the previous lectures. Ligand dissociation, oxidative addition leads to hydrogen and cyanide oxidatively adding to the metal. Now I can have the olefin coordination, because it's a +2 oxidation state. You have a olefin coordination, hydrogen migration, and then reductive elimination. So there is nothing much to explain in this catalytic cycle, because I have explained every step previously. So there seems to be nothing new. But if you look at this, what is interesting is that when you use nickel, you have very good control over the way in which the HCN is added, and you end up adding hydrogen in an anti-Markovnikov fashion. And so you can end up with adiponitrile, that is this compound, adiponitrile. When you have nickel with 4 sterically demanding ligands. So the ligand that we're talking about is this ligand, orthotolide. Oxygen, sorry, let me write it again. So this particular ligand is the ligand that is a choice, because if you put too bulky a ligand, the ligand reaction will slow down. But this was optimum. DuPont, the company that makes nylon 6,6, because they have 6 carbons. They generated adiponitrile from butadiene, and they converted it into the amine and oxidized this to the carboxylic acid. So you have COH here, COH here. So they prepared nylon 6,6 from a combination of this acid and this amine. So the trick was to use nickel, and the trick was to use this bulky phosphine so that you get a single product. Because even if I have a small amount of, even if I do all this control, I get about 15% of the branched product. Okay, I'll show you this in the next slide. But let's skip this idealistic catalytic cycle. I have written it out in such a way that each nickel HCN addition takes place in an independent step. So you always end up with the terminal addition of a CN. So the bulky P3 ligand controls. If you use cobalt, you end up with a mixture, a terrible mixture. But if you end up using nickel with the bulky phosphine, then you get very good control. You get 85% of the adiponitrile and the right nitrile and 15% of the impurity. Now, why is it a problem? Because why do you get these intermediates which are different? You can even get 1,4 addition of H and CN, and that is shown here. This is 1,4 addition of H and CN, 1,4 addition. Okay, so because you can have if I add hydrogen to a terminal position of a butadiene, if I add hydrogen to the terminal position, this is nothing but a sigma eta 1 form of an allyl complex. So you can have an equilibrium between these two forms, right? And if I now bring nickel to the terminal position again, then I will end up with a 1,4 addition. So this can now go into this, and this can reductively eliminate, this has reductively eliminated to give you a 1,4 addition. I've already written 1,4 addition here. Okay, so this is the reason why you this can just give you addition to in a 1,2 fashion, and that can give you an allylic cyanide, and that's the branched product. So you can have in principle all these impurities in the reaction medium. So that's why that is an idealistic cycle. In principle, it is mostly 1 and 3, and it is the 1 and 4 additions of the cyano group. If I have notice that if I have the addition in this position, this is actually got a carbon that can be chiral. This was recognized by a person called Rajan Babu. Rajan Babu was in DuPont, I think, to start with. He has studied this. I will give you the reference for this article, which was, he later on moved to Ohio State University, and his recent article on from Ohio State University is what I will give you a reference to. I don't have time to go into that because we are already running out of time. So let me quickly tell you hydroamination. Otherwise, it's too much of simple HA addition. So to olefins. Now we have one acetylene case. CP2TiMe2 in the presence of amine generates an intermediate which is like so. The reaction simply involves elimination sigma bond metathesis to give you this compound, which can eliminate again through elimination of NHR3 group and a hydrogen from another amine to form an imine, titanoimine. This titanoimine can form a metallocyclobutene, aza titanocyclobutene. This now has the option of adding hydrogen and hydrogen to the carbon and nitrogen to the titanium to give you another intermediate like this. So you have a series. This is something that you've already seen in the metathesis reaction. Metathesis type of reaction. You have a 2+2 cycloaddition reaction. You now have a reaction with HNR2, right? This is simply HNR2 addition. So that leads to, of course, one of the R's is hydrogen here. So I should, let me write it again. We have H, NH, R, let me be consistent, NHR3, then it leads to a sigma bond metathesis between these two bonds. Sigma bond metathesis between these two bonds gives you this product. And that can reductively eliminate, again, giving you this enamine, which is the final product. So you can have a variety of metathesis, so a variety of HA additions, a variety of HA additions to unsaturated carbon, oxygen and carbon bonds. So this is something that is possible. I'll stop here. I think I have run out of time. So I will be posting some things in the Teams website. Please follow it along, and I will see you on Wednesday. Unless you have any questions right now. Any questions? Okay, so we'll see you on Wednesday and then we'll continue.